I'm Anthony Harper here with Senator Janie Ward-Engelking. And thank you, Senator Engelking, for joining me today.
It's my pleasure.
You know, a lot of people have been talking about issues regarding Common Core, and an element of that is SBAC. And just wanted for you to just share your ideas about the current Idaho curriculum. If you see any problems, what do you think about the current curriculum and SBAC?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to know that the Idaho curriculum is uniquely Idaho. And some people have this mistaken idea that it was comes from the federal government, and that's just not true. It is written by Idaho educators, very skilled, highly skilled educators here in Idaho. And yes, we have entered into what we call Common Core, which means that if you're teaching multiplication in California, then you'll also be teaching multiplication here in Idaho that same year, so that we have a lot of mobility with our students anymore. And what was happening is that students that would move from state to state might miss a whole section of math or a whole section of science or other subjects. And so the goal was to see if we could align that a little bit, but I think it's important to realize that that curriculum then was written by Idaho teachers. Multiplication, all of that, those are standards, and that Idaho teachers weigh in on those and set the curriculum and set the what's the minimum standard for the state of Idaho.
So the Common Core is not, were you saying that it was a federal program initiated?
No, it actually wasn't. It was states coming together, teachers and state departments of education coming together and saying, is there some areas where we should have some commonality per grade level? And maybe in mathematics and reading, so that students that are moving from one section of the country or from one state to another state don't end up missing a whole section of subject matter. But that, keep in mind that then, if once that was aligned to some degree, and really only in the math and the reading and writing areas, English, reading, and math, then it was up to teachers in each of those states then to develop the curriculum around those standards.
I've heard concerns about, there's an element of this called SBAC. What do you know about SBAC and concerns that you might have, or you know of any other legislators or people that might be concerned about SBAC? Well,
SBAC is the evaluation piece. It's replacing what we used to call ISAT, and it's the Smarter Balance Consortium. And it was a group of states that went together and developed testing that would actually align with the curriculum, with the new, what they are calling Idaho Common Core curriculum. Mm-hmm. The problem with it, and I think there's quite a bit of concern over it, is that it's very long. It's up to 7 hours of testing, and that's a concern for anybody. And so I think that hopefully that's going to be addressed, because when you're asking a third grader to take a test, and even if you're giving it to them over a period of days, that's a lot of time where you're not introducing any new material. You're just testing over material they've already had. So I think that is a valid concern. Many of us share that concern. There's also a sense that this is it's not only a long test, but it's when we're asking children to do all of their testing on a computer, and especially if they're young children, they're not as capable of typing. They haven't even had typing actually until 5th grade in many cases. So we're asking them to type their responses, which it's a difficult system for them to use. Although, having said that, I do know that kids in today's age, they can use computers much better than adults, I guess. So maybe that's not as big a concern as I originally thought. But I do think we have to make sure that we are using tests the way they're meant to be used. They shouldn't be high stakes. Mm-hmm. They should be used to evaluate how a child is doing and whether or not the instruction needs to be changed in any way to facilitate additional learning. And teachers use testing every single day and every single week, but it should be, in my opinion, it should be developed so that it's directing instruction and making sure that we're improving our instruction so that children can learn, and that's what we should be using it for. Not high stakes, not at the end of the year. One test does not tell the whole story, and children should not have that kind of pressure on them.
Yeah, Dr. Don Coberly, Boise School District superintendent, along with some other superintendents, voiced objection to the SBAC. Are you aware of their objections, and would you share their objections and maybe to try to either get rid of SBAC, have some other alternative?
Yeah, and first I would just back up for a minute. Superintendent Coberly is very supportive of Common Core, and I want to just step back for a minute and talk just a little bit about Common Core, and then I will address the question on SBAC. Okay. The SBAC was developed to test this new curriculum, which is Common Core. One of the problems, and I think one of the reasons there was so much pushback on Common Core, is that curriculum was adopted at a time in this state where we had huge cuts in education. So there was no money for professional development, there was no money for mentoring, there was no money for new curriculum or for new resources, and parents were not notified that this new curriculum was coming down, in advance. They just, all of a sudden, it was here. Our former superintendent of public instruction had not taken public testimony, or hadn't gone around the state and said, this is what we're going to do, this is what it is involved, and this is why we're doing it. So I think we had problems rolling out that Common Core, and certainly I understand parents' frustration because we didn't have the resources to go with this new Common Core that we put in place. And it's very difficult for parents when a child brings something home and there's no book. There's nothing that they can use to assist that child. So it was very frustrating, and it was frustrating for some teachers because the resources were limited at that point in time. Having said that, I think now we've added back some of that professional development, some of that mentoring. We've put some more resources into the classroom, and we've connected most schools with the internet, so they have the ability now to pull those lessons that deal with Common Core. They can pull them off the internet, and so there are some actual, tangible resources. And SBAC was developed to test this new Common Core. It was aligned with the new core standards and making sure that, that we were testing the appropriate things for third graders and fourth graders, etc. But as I said before, it's a very long test, and it's one more test. We do a great deal of testing in the classrooms, and we have to continue to, I think, look at how much testing is appropriate. Are we spending enough time presenting material, or are we spending more time testing students? And that's the pushback. And I think Dr. Coberly is correct in saying that we already have tests available that we're using that have been mandated by the state. We're already doing those tests. We're doing them in high school. They take the SAT test and the pre-SAT tests. Those can be used to measure the same, the same curriculum matter that we're using this SBAC for. So maybe it's not necessary to have duplication there. And I think you're going to see that as we move into Every Child Succeeds Act into the new act that was passed by Congress, we're going to have more flexibility in what kind of testing we can use that will be acceptable to the federal government. So I think we're going to see a little more flexibility there. But the key is that we cannot, we need to make sure that we're doing an appropriate amount of testing, but not an extensive amount of testing.
So you would agree with Dr. Colby and the other superintendents to replace or get rid of the SBAC in favor of what you just said, the SAT and some other testing opportunities?
Well, the SBAC, at this point, it's just being rolled out. It's, teachers and children were taking it at first year or so. I think you're going to see a lot of rewrite and a lot of changing in that test, and it may end up that it is an appropriate test, but at this point I think it's too long. And if we have the opportunity to use testing that we're currently doing in place of that, we should be allowed to do that, especially if it's measuring the skills that we want presented.
Is there anything held up in any committees about SBAC as far as dropping SBAC? Any legislation about that? That's really not legislation right now. Okay. That's going to happen at the State Department level. The State Department has to submit paperwork basically saying we'd like to have flexibility in the type of testing we used in the state of Idaho. And so I believe that paperwork is being done. Before that, our previous superintendent of instruction, state superintendent of schools, had signed a contract, had sent in paperwork that committed us through this year. Now there'll be new paperwork being presented, and I think Superintendent Ibarra is doing that. And then we'll have hopefully more flexibilities for school districts to look at different type of testing, and if they can show that it's measuring the skills that are essential for our children, that they will be able to use a variety of testing. Okay, and there's also concerns I've heard about data mining. Do you know anything about that? Maybe people have shared concerns with you about information that is being gathered on the makeup of the family that children have an interface, with Common Core about?
Sure, and we're all concerned about data collection. I mean, we deal with that all the time because we know that in the world we live in now, hacking is possible. But I can tell you that safeguards are in place, and that school districts and the State Department are very careful in making sure that even repeated requests for data wouldn't link a child's name to any specific data. We have passed legislation regarding that, and we continue to be very conscientious of that issue, and we want to make sure that we protect children's data and our citizens of Idaho's data. But the reality is we live in a world of computers, and we know that we have all of our data is stored at certain places, IRS, vital statistics, and we just have to be diligent to make sure that we have safeguards and firewalls in place that protect children. But certainly that's something that we are very conscious of, and we continue to monitor and pass additional laws if we think they're necessary to ensure that the data of our children is safe.
Was it clear that I didn't quite understand as far as your support for with Dr. Coberly and others to would you join with that? At this point you would join with them in their opposition to SBAC? Or?
Well, I'm very supportive of Dr. Coberly's views, and I've talked to him many times, and we agree that right now in the tests that are being given in Boise provide the data that we need and actually gets the results back to us quicker as the educators, and so we're able to use that data in a more productive way than SBAC. Now, that's not to say that down the road we won't be looking at a different type of SBAC that is actually better than what we're looking at now. And at this point, we don't have an option. We have to give that. But as of next year, the State Department, I do believe, will have the go-ahead to allow for a district to submit, to ask for permission to use different tests. We don't have that luxury this year. Federal funds are tied to having the statewide test that was, as I said, was entered into with our previous state superintendent of schools. So we don't have that option right now.
Along with this Common Core, I've heard some parents concerned about Islam, textbooks that might be related to Common Core, Islam, and education, or regarding homosexuality. Do anything about those issues? That's ridiculous. These are the Idaho Common Core is written by Idaho teachers who are very highly skilled and very ethical. And I've looked at all of these, I've looked at the Common Core standards that are being used throughout the state, and there's nothing in there that would address that. They're written because they're exactly what our children need to know to prepare themselves for being, going to college, getting advanced certification of some kind, and they're exactly the things that you would want your children to know. And we're talking, the only 3 areas that are addressed with Common Core right now are reading, language, and mathematics. And what it does is it allows children to do more discovery type lessons instead of just rote memorization. And I think we can all agree that that's a positive thing for our children. Having that creativity and that ability to think outside the box, it's what's made American great. I mean, we have more patents, more inventions than any other country in the world, and it's because we allow our children to explore and to come up with their own discoveries. And when we go back and start teaching rote memorization, which is what the ISAT was, we do great harm to children, in my opinion. Well, I thank you for sharing your thoughts and your concerns about this. Once again, I am talking with Janie Ward-Engelking, and you are a Democratic senator here?
Yes, I am.
And
from District 18 here in Boise. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.